Hi, my name is Irene Soriano, and I'm a poet based in Los Angeles. I'm the author of one poetry collection, um, Primates from an Archipelago, which was released in 2017.
Awesome. And hi, I'm Derrick Austin. I'm a teacher and poet, and I'm the author of two books of poems. My first book, Trouble the Water, came out in 2016 from BOA Editions, and my second is forthcoming in September of this year. It's called Tenderness, also from BOA. Yeah.
So, Derek, when I saw the call out for work for Pride Publics, I was fascinated with this idea of being able to publicly create kind of a literary altar to a queer luminary. So, can you talk about your luminary, Simone? Um, your featured written work pays direct tribute to her, paying tribute to the durag. So, and the feeling of jubilation and admiration is so apparent in that bit excerpt included for the exhibition. Um, can you talk about that? And is it part of a longer piece?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. To Yeah, I guess to answer both of them. So I wrote the poem before I heard the call for Pride Publics, actually. I wrote it in February or January of this year. And I had been given a writing assignment by a teacher. So been given this prompt. And I had a week to do it. So I was trying to find inspiration for this poem that I had to write. And a week before on RuPaul's Drag Race, I had seen Simone. Simone was a competitor on the past season of RuPaul's Drag Race. And the category on the runway for that episode was trains. So all the queens had to come out in outfits with really long, extravagant trains. And Simone came out in this gorgeous cerulean jumpsuit with this gorgeous cerulean do-rag that just went on for miles. And that do-rag was her train, and I was just gagged. It gave me everything that I wanted, and it was just such a moment of joy. That episode aired in January, I think. So after the long year that was last year, I, like everybody else, was in a very low place.
Mhm.
And I remember when I saw Simone on that episode, just like feeling this deep joy and happiness of this gorgeous tribute to blackness, to queerness. And yeah, like that moment was just really special for me in the midst of all that I was going through in that moment. And so when I found out about Pride Publics, I remembered that I had this poem, and I thought it would be really beautiful to pay tribute to this young queer artist. I think that in addition to honoring our forebears and the folks who are elders in our community who are out there doing the work and who have done the work, I think it's great to like put some shine on some younger queer artists who are doing amazing work. I think I'm not that much older than Simone, but I think all the time about like this young generation of queer people, this young generation of queer Black folks who are just so emboldened and free in a way that even I didn't feel when I was their age. And so I thought it'd be a wonderful idea to pay tribute and to show some love to Simone, this queer Black artist that I deeply love and can't wait to see what they do next. Yeah.
Have you made any attempts to send the piece to Simone?
No, I haven't. I mean, the poem isn't published yet. I still have it. So yeah, like the excerpt is as far out into the world as the poem has yet gone. But who knows? Maybe she'll see it.
Maybe through this. So
Yeah, yeah. This is
forward it to Simone. How fun.
this is true. Yeah. So let me ask you a question. I'm so excited to get to talk to you. So my question also concerns or involves your Pride Publics piece. I was really taken by the way that it invokes rage and joy and also community and ancestry. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about who you consider your artistic forebears. Who are you writing in the tradition of? And also, if you are writing toward a particular audience, who do you see your audience as, if you have one that you imagine when you write?
That's an interesting question because being Filipino American, of course, I'm working within this larger sort of American literary tradition, right? And it's very apparent that there might be one or two Filipino American authors or writers that appear in the canon.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, Novelist Jessica Hagedorn, who's won an American Book Award. Um, and let's see who else. My gosh, I can only think of Jessica right now. So when I think forebears, um, it's actually, like you said, more of my contemporaries that I look towards as far as inspiration and as far as like why I write and who I write for. Of course, I write for everybody, but there's a really special space for me um, to when I think of Filipino Americans in my work. Um, when I was starting out writing, it was so hard to find other Filipino American writers published,
Hmm.
and much less queer Filipino American writers. And so it was always, an attempt at, you know, meeting other, being in literary spaces and trying to see who knew other Filipino American writers. And so what happened actually when I started is that there was this Ghanaian American writer that I met, Mary Dankwa, who told me, you know what, if you're trying to find your community, you need to create the space for your community to show up.
Hmm.
And so with her help, I put together a literary reading series and pitched it to here in LA, the Japanese American National Museum. And I said, there are, Asian Pacific American writers out there, and we just need a space to show up, do our work, read it, and bring audiences to this space. And they said yes, and they funded it. And that is how I found my community. And that's how I found um, my my queer writer community, my Asian Pacific American writers community. It ran for, gosh, was it 5 years? And that's coming up with a program of four writers a year. And so I was able to invite a lot of writers. It's not just a single person. I would invite like three writers to come at a time. And one of the most influential writers that I was able to invite and really informs my work were Filipino American queer writers like R. Zamora Linmark, um, uh, Justin Chin, uh, and actually, this writer named Lisa Asagi. Now, the interesting thing about these writers are they went to grad school together and they wrote together, and they were all in Hawaii in U of H. And it's interesting to me that that group of writers really influenced me, and it's amazing to me that they went on to write and get published, and I still refer to their work, and sometimes I think like if I had not come across these writers, I probably would be quite a lost writer out there, just still trying to find my community. This was in the 90s. It's so different now. I mean, so many writers of color are, getting published, and there's, a Filipino American writer that, gets published, you know, I mean, maybe twice in a year from, pretty significant publishers. But it was just so different back when, I was starting out in my mid 20s. It was the
Mhm.
90s. And so when I write, I think about that. And it drives me to write more because I'm thinking of, maybe writers out there who are also trying to find the stories, and, the writer that writes about situations and um, stories that reflect sort of their reality. So, you know, that's my short and long answer.
No, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Like the way, because so often I feel like other people and also writers ourselves, like we often think about writing as such a solitary thing, like we're in our apartments just like typing away at the keyboard. But there's such a beautiful way that poetry is a communal activity and such a communal gift. And it's so beautiful that you cultivated that in your community and like got everybody together to read poems, and the way that everybody, it got rid of a lot of isolation, I think, and also just
Yes.
like fomented a lot of creativity, which I think is really beautiful, and like I love it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious too for you. Like, what did your community writing wise look like when you first started out? I mean, were there places that you would frequent, or what did that look like?
So for me, I've been extremely fortunate in terms of the writing communities that I've been able to be a part of. When I was in undergrad, I was an English major, so like I started really early with this whole writing thing, and I went to the University of Tampa, and like me and all the other like-minded, weird, artistic kids who were English majors and writing majors,
Awesome.
we would get together and go to open mics together and organize open mics. And, then I went to grad school, and I was super fortunate with my cohort there. And just, it was the first time I remember when I went to Michigan, it was the first time that I realized that community was a thing that you could cultivate, and that community was a thing um, that you could help cultivate yourself, because I was often the only black queer person in the room. So, I often just kind of felt like I was this weird anomaly. Um, but no, like there was ways that I could like seek out communities, and a really important community that I found was Cave Canem, which is
Mm.
one of the biggest organizations for Black poetry in the U.S. and the world, probably. And I remember going to my first Cave Canem retreat, um, and it was the first time that I'd been around so many black artists in one space. Like I'd never been in a room with that many black people that wasn't my family. And I'm just like, look at all of these brilliant black poets and essayists and fiction writers all here to like workshop poems and talk about poems, and seeing just the multifaceted way that everybody was writing and thinking about not just race and not just blackness, but everything. um, it was so liberating for me as a queer black poet. And yeah, and just like my travels, I've been really fortunate to just be with brilliant communities of artists of color, and I'm so thankful every day for it, because it can be hard to find your people.
Yes.
um so I feel really grateful for the ones that I found and the ones that I have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because back, I mean, in the 90s, I mean, the internet was not, I mean, the way that it functions now, that did not exist back in the 90s. So I remember when I would do events, I would actually be in front of the Xerox machine in the museum, Xeroxing flyers,
Hmm.
stuffing them in envelopes, mailing them, because there was no Facebook events. There was no, I mean, I think I was still using a pager at that point. So, the importance of really getting people together, um, to help create this community of writers, was really, really informs kind of why I write now too. I just remembered how important it was to, not just write for myself or my community, but write so that the community could see that they had their own writers.
Mhm.
If you were to attend a lot of the reading like series um, programs out back then, I did not see any Filipino American. So of course you enter, and I'd see any queer Filipino Americans at that, writers or poets at that. So you would enter, and there would be that feeling like, oh, I'm in a creative space with other writers, but no, but none of them look like me. I remember going to there's a literary space here in LA called Beyond Baroque, and I would go to an open mic. It was the first open mic that I ever attended, and I was looking around. I'm like, oh, nobody looks like me, but what the hell? Let me go for it. But it was so important, uh, and from and just after that, I just knew, okay, well, you're not going to find them if you're just sitting around. You're going to have to really work, and I did, and that's the community I you know walk and talk and live in right now, and I'm just so thankful. And now with the internet, it's like it's so much easier to contact other writers or create events around writing, and I'm just really thankful of technology and movement and time.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. It's like just with a click of a button, there's like a whole world of queer writers all over the world. That's, it's amazing. It's even more different than like when I was starting in like college trying to like Google like who are the gay poets. And now 10 years later it's just you go on Twitter and there's everybody's here. Like there's just
Yes,
such a wealth of queer artistry that's so available. It's amazing.
I'm amazed as well. Thank goodness. But
Amen. Yes.
no, it's really interesting though, because when I do guest speaker gigs in colleges, um, I still meet students. The one thing that I do is I always bring these books by Filipino American poets and writers. So it's like big, it's heavy, and I have to wheel it in, and then I
Mhm.
lay it in the classroom, and I say, these are the writers in our community, and they're all flabbergasted. They're like, what? We didn't know there were Filipino American poets galore. I'm like, really? I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And so yeah, it's interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true. Like, even though there's this unprecedented access to it, it's a thing. Like, if you don't know it exists, how do you know to look for it? And so I think that it's continuously important for us to keep doing our work in the sense that every poem that we publish or a piece that we do somehow, hopefully, it gets out into the world, and we never know into whose hands our work reaches. And I think that's so important that we keep doing the work and we keep showing up to places. Like I in academia, like it's really easy still for students to like not know
Yes.
the the breadth of like American literature, just to
Mm,
like focus on like art, like this country, like the breadth of queer artists from the United States, of artists of color in this country. When I started teaching, I taught in Michigan and Wisconsin, and most of my students were mainly white, and most of my students were largely from rural communities outside
mm,
of the university. And so, often the poets that I would bring them were poets of color that I thought were pretty well known, and they'd be like, "Never heard of these poets," and I'm like, "How?" And it's there are still there's still work to be done, and um, us being out here, hopefully, who knows, maybe this video might be something for somebody. Like that would be electrifying to think about.
so Derrick, a lot of illuminating things. um I will wait to hear word from you that Simone got a hold of your piece.
Yeah, here's hoping. Fingers crossed. It was a joy talking with you, Irene. I really appreciate it. And,
Same.
hopefully we'll get to link up sometime in the future.
I
It'd be great.
know. Maybe we can read.
Yes,
What? If you're ever in LA, I can set something up.
would love that.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Bye.